Hey, welcome back to another Bitcoin Reformation podcast. I'm Ben Haupt, joined by my good friends David Rufner and Jared Townley. David, how are you this fine day?
I am well. I'm mending. Some sort of respiratory flu this week. It's a beautiful week in September, and I decided to get sick. I don't typically, when it comes to respiratory stuff, get just small colds. At the same time, I try to resist, that caricature of men with their man colds as, sort of being weenies. But my wife definitely took care of me. I'll say this. Here's the fun part about being sick, if there is a fun part, is we're already huggers in my family, but when I'm a sick puppy and I'm down, suddenly I really love to give those hugs. Suddenly I grow tender. The world gets smaller. I count my blessings, even just being down for the count with a respiratory flu and the like. So that's the downside and the upside of the Rufner home this week.
You remind me of that old Robitussin commercial with Dad that's down and out. So, yeah.
Well, I don't remember it, but I'll take it. It doesn't sound like it's too bad. So,
Jared, how are you today?
We are doing well here. The season of miserable, dying summer seems to have somewhat come to a close. So this morning when I went on my run, it was 63 degrees, and I felt
beautiful.
I felt like I needed to put on a down jacket. I was so cold. But it's one of those, the seasons change, and it's just really nice to not feel like you're sweating profusely outside. We went up to the mountains this weekend to just do a little picnic for dinner, and we left. And we always count on like 20 degrees difference. So we left, it was like 95. And basically assume it's going to be 75 up in the mountains. And by the time we got there, it said like 71 on our van when we pulled up to the parking lot. But when we left, I kid you not, probably because we ate dinner, but my nose was red. I was like, getting the cold sniffles. I had goosebumps all over because I had shorts and a t-shirt on, and I got in the car and it said 64. And so I don't know if that's the humidity level here that's different or just me being climatized to the desert summers, but it is amazing to not feel like I'm dying, but yet I look into the future and see things like there's going to be 30-degree days and 50-degree days, and I do not know how I'm going to live because of those things. But nevertheless, things are really well here. Judah's still, 3 months old. Zoe is, her thing is, I don't know, did I tell you she's riding a bike yet? I don't know if I've shared that here.
How old
So
is she?
she's pedaling. So 4,
Wow.
she's 4, 4 in a month. So she had done the balance bike sort of thing that they say you should do now for kids, and afterwards her grandpa had gotten her a big kid bike, and she was struggling getting the balance for it. But after her birthday, we had tried pedaling once and it was too hard. And then we got it again, and it's one of those, I mean, you just see the joy on their face, and it's exactly how it is and looks in all of the movies and every single TV show. Like, such a proud dad. I love you, child. This is amazing. Like, it was just really awesome, magical. So we go as fast as we can as we bike from our home to school and back, and it's a joy in that way too. So things are well here. How about you, Ben?
That's awesome. Yeah, things are fine at the Haupt house. Summer's actually it was kind of over. We had a couple of weeks of nice weather here in St. Louis, but leave it to St. Louis. We're back to mid 90s here this weekend. 96 tomorrow, 98 maybe.
Oh,
So yeah, when it's cooler in St. Louis in Vegas than St. Louis, that it's hot. So yeah, but we're doing fine. Everybody's fine in the house, and yeah, we're just plugging along in the middle of fall, and yeah, plugging away with work and everything else. So good. Well, it's good to be back together for another episode, and we're talking today about this new report from this business called River.com. River is not officially a sponsor. I suppose we could reach out to them and see if they would throw us a few dollars if we
Uh,
were pumping their business. But I think at least a couple of us are users of their business. I've been a River customer for I don't remember how long, a couple of years maybe. And so river.com is this company. It's a Bitcoin only company, and they are really known for making it easy to do what's called dollar cost averaging. So you link your bank account to River, which is a very normal thing, and people shouldn't be scared about this. River is not going to start taking extra money. Really, it's no different than paying your cell phone bill online or anything else. You're allowing River to take a small amount from your bank once a week or once a month or whatever you set it up. And once you do your initial changeover and you send them a little money from your bank account and buy your first Bitcoin. After that, there are no fees when you buy Bitcoin. And so it's a really nice, cheap, easy way to buy a small amount of Bitcoin on a regular basis, dollar cost averaging, which a lot of people have suggested is the best way to get started in Bitcoin. But we're not talking just about their business today. We're talking about a specific business report that they released September of 2025. The title of their research report is Why Business Owners Are Putting 22% of Profits into Bitcoin. And I'm interested not just in businesses, but particularly interested in nonprofits and churches, ministries, and what would it be like to put 22% of surplus monies coming into Bitcoin. I think that would be a very wild idea for a lot of people in the ministry space, and yet this business report is giving significant reason why businesses are thinking we should be putting 22% of their profits into Bitcoin. So we're gonna walk through the report. Jared can put this in the show notes so that you can take a look and read through it with us. But before we dive into the report and start discussing, let me throw it back to Jared or David. Any big insights overall, kind of, before we dive into the particulars, either on River or about this particular report?
I don't know River like you guys do. I've not used them. I think I've looked at them. I've admired them. They have certainly credibility as an organization. Bitcoin only, I think you said.
Yep.
Great projects. Although they want your business, they seem glad to be additive to the whole
Yep.
space and into all Bitcoiners and just the whole conversation. And which, by the way, is not true of every business in every industry, but is broadly true in the Bitcoin world. Another reason why this Bitcoin conversation might pique your interest. Pardon my cough. As for this report, I have things marked on maybe every page, every other page. I think most compelling, not just as standalone, but as centerpiece, I guess I would say. Let me see if I can find it here. It'd be faster. Is that they said, what if, and then they picked some flagship companies, but what if some companies had, beginning 2020, put 1%, it's on, here it is, page 11. What if they had put 1% of their profit, I should say of their reserves, not their profit, 1% of their reserves into Bitcoin? How would they have performed over the next 5 years from 2020 to 2025, July 2025, which was their, everything came up to that date. Now we're in September, 2 months later. But they did this for Microsoft, they did it for Google, and they did it for Apple. 1%. I mean, even for us, if we were to lose one penny of every dollar, we would survive that, right? I would prefer not to lose that, but we would survive it. And they said, what if they had done this? And here's what was true of Microsoft, Google, and Apple. Three of the biggest companies in the world, three of the big seven, as they're often termed, is that Microsoft, which in fact, with all of their investments across many different asset classes, in that same time lost $14.1 billion of their reserve. They would have made 16.5 billion if they had put 1% into Bitcoin. So they're down 14. They could have been up 16. Google is down 14.6, could have been up 13.9. And Apple is down 21.4, the biggest loser of the three, and could have been up 29 billion. It's just that was the centerpiece for me, I think.
And
It just and showing the power of this.
we should say that in that chart, the loss would be essentially from inflation. The problem of
Thank you.
their
Yeah.
treasury portfolio, their reserve portfolio, given the very real problem of inflation, it would have really taken a serious hit on their reserves, especially if they were conservatively invested in a 60-40 portfolio, or maybe even more conservative than that. Certainly not keeping up with inflation. Even I think I've seen reports that even 100% of a reserve in equities still would have underperformed just having 1% in Bitcoin.
Yeah, so that's the attention grabber, right? If I'm an individual, I mean, we've sort of shown other charts or run numbers like that as concerns individuals, families. But this is the attention grabber as concerns businesses, right? Whether privately owned or publicly traded, that's fine. They did that. Now you take that and you combine it with River talking to you about their clients towards the end of the report, where they say, at this point, let me see, Bitcoin. Oh, I wish I'd had it a little bit quicker here. They give the rundown of their clients
Uh,
and show that their clients are, oh, it's actually the next page, really. They're allocated an average of 22% of their net income. Now that's net income, not necessarily reserves. So what River's helping people do is deal not with maybe their overall treasury, but their cash flow and their growing treasury going forward. So what they're saying is, hey, our clients average putting 22% of their profit in, not just 1%, 22%. So if in the last 5 years that 1% would have made such a big splash for those giant companies, and here's the biggest if this performance, even within a close range, an acceptable range, continues going forward, imagine what this will mean for River's clients going forward. It's just truly remarkable for them. And I'm going to stop talking for a variety of reasons, including I'm going to cough.
I mean, I think what they say too, somewhere around there, is that people didn't start putting 22% in, but that it largely became 22% of their income, all those sort of things. That it was they didn't sell what they had bought, and so the position size grew just because the price of Bitcoin had gone up, which I think is another just entirely powerful and another insightful way to think about, hey, it's not that you need to start with 22%, but if you start with 10%, assuming that the thing that it normally does, being Bitcoin's price, that it will become a larger percentage, assuming that you don't rebalance, assuming that you don't sort of take advantage of those gains for something else. So I think that's a great another sub point there.
Yeah, Jared, they say that first sentence on page 13, because Bitcoin has historically appreciated over time, nearly 1/3 of River's business clients now hold a majority, greater than 50%, of their treasury assets in Bitcoin, even if they began with only small allocations.
There
Right?
is this there's this saying in the Bitcoin world, and it comes up a lot, especially when people are debating on social media and somebody tries to make arguments of why Bitcoin will never make it, will never last. And the kind of concluding point that a lot of Bitcoiners will say is have fun staying poor. And I don't want to be too hard on ministries and nonprofits, but I worry that ministries that say we don't have enough money to allot to something so risky as Bitcoin. I'll just be the hot take guy for a second and say have fun staying poor. Here's I'd like to just kind of walk through a bit of the report. And for ministry leaders, I want you to be thinking about how you do make investment decisions in your investment committee. I suppose you probably have some kind of investment committee, and think for a second, how is that investment committee making decisions? My hunch is that it's either based on the individuals on the investment committee, their personal approach to their retirement account, or secondly, they're even better, hopefully they're studying other organizations, maybe even it's business people in the congregation that are bringing a little bit of their business sense, and they're saying, well, this is how we do it at our corporation. I work for whatever bank or hospital or factory or whatever, and here's how we do it at our company. Well, if you would look at what are companies doing, what are organizations in the for-profit world doing, on page 1 there is a really interesting chart of business Bitcoin inflows by year. So in 2022, businesses only put in $500 million into Bitcoin. In 2023, not much different, 2.8 billion. In 2021, so similar, 5.7 billion. But in 2024, last year, businesses put in $31 billion into Bitcoin. And this year, just up until the end of August, have already put in 43. They're on a trend to put in 66, almost $67 billion in dollars into Bitcoin. Here's what that says. Businesses are starting to pay attention. I am sure that churches will lag the business industry because usually, I mean, Jesus said it well. Not many people in the church are as you know, they're the people. How was it that people in the world are as crude as serpents, right? And the church is not like them, and it was a little bit to the church's shame. It was like they're outthinking you. Well, the church always will lag, probably behind, because we're slow to adopt. That's, I think, to our detriment. Faith-filled people could be on the cutting edge and the earliest adopters of things because of their confidence in Christ. But the other chart that I wanted to point out just on the next page, on page 2, is how Bitcoin ownership distributes out among a whole bunch of different groups. And you have on the far left some calculations of some other entities and maybe the founder of Bitcoin, Satoshi. But then you have a huge, and lost Bitcoin that are evidently in wallets that have never been moved. We actually saw earlier this summer some of those wallets come back to life, and so there might be reason to think that maybe Bitcoin that hasn't moved for a long time isn't lost, but people are just sitting on it. We'll see. But then 65% of Bitcoin that have been mined are in the hands of individuals, the earliest of adopters. But then business is 6.2% of the supply, and it's growing. And so that goes right along with ETFs and funds at 7.8%. And then governments, nation states are still lagging behind. It's very complicated for a nation state to start buying Bitcoin because of all the agreements with the central banks of the world, the ills of the world. So Bitcoin, or businesses and ETFs are growing amounts of Bitcoin, and I just think that that's really interesting. They're showing this growing trend that businesses are paying attention to Bitcoin. Any thoughts on that? Just this overall trend of businesses getting behind this?
I looked at the numbers for their 2024 report, and in each of those cases, roughly speaking, businesses, ETFs, governments in particular, each doubled their holdings within the year, which I thought was interesting. And if you were to look at let me see where that was. I think the chart now, two more pages down, page 4, they say that Bitcoin treasury companies, which is a segment of the corporations buying Bitcoin, but 75% of them at least, they're buying roughly 1,400 per day, and they're in second place. The funds and ETFs are buying a little bit more, but something really close to also 1,400 per day. So those two alone, that's before you get to conventional businesses, that's before you get to governments, that's before you get to individuals, are buying 2,800 per day on average here in 2025, when only 450 new Bitcoin are being mined. So oftentimes there's a talk about supply shock, that this could lead to supply shock. At the same time, I both believe in that and don't believe in it, because I think people will sell at all kinds of different prices. And that's, I think, what we're seeing a lot of here. We've been now up over 100,000. The cost basis, or the price of Bitcoin, up over 100,000 for more than 100 days now. It seems to be stabilizing there, but it's kind of crawling sideways, up and down just a little bit. And what you're seeing is just a lot of people who may be held for a long time are saying, this is a great moment for me to rotate out of some of mine. And other people are buying it up. Eventually, there will come a point, though, where sellers in the range of 100 to 125 will become exhausted, whereas it looks like from this report as well that the buyers, those hungry for new Bitcoin from the corporate side, business side, governments as well, individuals as well, the demand is just higher. And eventually that should, if all things remain true, push the cost basis for Bitcoin higher still. So I find that another fascinating part here is, what is the appetite for Bitcoin from these different sectors? And the answer is, it's rather huge compared to the daily new supply that naturally comes from blocks being mined on average every 10 minutes.
So I think one of the things that this report tries to do, maybe not as the main goal, but kind of the sub goal, if you will, is to really lay out how not just these Bitcoin treasury companies are buying Bitcoin, but that regular, call them mom and pop, call them average Joe, call it the normie sort of people are buying Bitcoin. And to me, that was one of the most surprising things, right? So even on that second page that Ben was talking about, they broke down known business Bitcoins between conventional and Bitcoin treasury. And so they say that there's 513,000 Bitcoin that are owned by conventional businesses. But then the most, to me, the coolest part of this report is on page 9. So sort of, we'll pull this thread and then maybe we go somewhere else. But it breaks down the businesses that they have. And so this is unique because they are the ones who work with these companies, these businesses that choose to have their Bitcoin, buy their Bitcoin on River, custody it with them or alongside of them, all those sort of things. And so they know who they are. They know what industries they work in. They know the types of businesses that they're running. And for me, looking on this chart on page 9 was just kind of like, oh, it's like really almost every single area, every single industry, there is someone that is buying Bitcoin with River. So for example, I think the things that we maybe aren't super surprised by are things like real estate. So there's some commercial real estate, some investment real estate companies that are buying them. But some of the more unique ones, like construction, there's a general contractor, there's electrical, engineering, HVAC, plumbing, consumer products, there's retail goods, food and beverage companies, there's energy, oil and gas companies, solar companies, there's hedge funds, there's dental, fitness people, chiropractors. And then, even in the nonprofit segment, there's religious nonprofits, political nonprofits, educational nonprofits, even not architectural, agricultural companies. So maybe even farms and their families are buying this too. And so you can go and look for yourself on this report on page 9. But it was just really like, wow, eye-opening sort of. I think the stuff, if you weren't in the Bitcoin space, and even if you were, you would hear all about these treasury companies right now because they're buying all the cryptos. They're not even buying just Bitcoin. They're buying everything now. And you might think, well, there's just all of these big companies that have billions and billions of dollars that are buying Bitcoin. Then there's all the retail people. And I think we largely just don't even think about the middle of that segment, which is the regular conventional businesses. And so I think for churches, nonprofits, we're late adopters, and we usually follow the, well, what is somebody else doing mindset? That we don't want to be the first mover, but we're more than willing to be a follower of somebody else, because if it didn't blow up in their face, then hopefully it won't blow up in ours, sort of thing. And so I think and would hope that as people see this, it's not like, hey, we're gonna buy a little bit of Bitcoin with a small percentage of our cash flow. Maybe it's 0.5% even, and it's not that we're the first ones to do this. We're just doing it alongside of all these other businesses that are both nonprofit, religious in nature, but also regular people doing regular sort of trying to make an income, provide a service for the world, for the community. And so it was just amazing to see the breakdown of the things that I would say, oh, I would not have thought about, or I wouldn't have expected necessarily to see that an electrical company is buying, an eye care company is buying, a pharmacy company is buying Bitcoin on River. And yet at the same time, I kind of hit myself in the head and say, well, duh, idiot. Like, it makes sense that these people are doing this because they understand what Bitcoin is. And so for you, listener, you're a nonprofit, you're a charity, hey, you're not going to be the first one in here. There are other people who have gone before you. I think this report does a good job of saying why they are doing not just good, but are succeeding very, very much so. And so it's not about like, well, we're doing something that no one else has done. We're all alone in this. There are other people who are already here. And I think that's a very powerful thing. It moves the Overton window, if you will, for a lot of people, I think, in a very powerful way.
Yeah, I want to go back to that report that David mentioned, the 2024 report. They did these case studies of these businesses, which we've just been talking about, and the businesses are not just the really big businesses that you hear about on CNBC or something like that, like Strategy. I mean, they did a case study of Ben Justman's Peony Lane, which is right here. Peony Lane is a small business. I mean, it is Ben's making all the wine himself. He has no other employees, as far as I know. It's a very small business, but yet he's putting a little bit of his profits into Bitcoin, and it's helping him in his business to cash flow his business. So yeah, I liked these charts too, and I noticed as I was looking, so the chart on page 8 says that a little over 6% of River's clients are nonprofits. And then when you go down to the next page that Jared mentioned earlier, under the nonprofit category, you see that, doing some rough math here, it looks like about half of their nonprofit work is religious. So it would, just from a kind of ballpark perspective, look to me like 63% of River's clients are religious nonprofits. So there are people already doing this, and I just think that that's really fascinating that there are other people that are already thinking through all this. I want to jump then to page 12 of the report. We've alluded to this briefly. The headline kind of grabber is 22% of businesses are putting 22% of their profits into Bitcoin. But this chart kind of breaks it out, that it says that over 40% of River's business clients are putting only 1 to 10% of their net income into Bitcoin. And that, I think, is a fantastic place to start. There are some businesses that are putting more than 50% in. About over 10% of businesses are putting more than 50% of their income into Bitcoin. That's fascinating. But you don't start there. And probably those businesses put in a small amount, and kind of like my own portfolio, you put a small amount in, but then business just outpaces everything else in your portfolio, and all of a sudden you have way more Bitcoin than anything else. I just think that that's fascinating for how businesses are thinking about this. The bottom chart on page 12 also has some pretty interesting things to say about how businesses are thinking about their investment. So some don't have any defined strategy. They probably have a founder or a CEO that's crazy and is just like, put it all into Bitcoin. Not crazy, but just put it into Bitcoin. Who cares? That's not a bad strategy. Others are a little more nuanced. Maintain current allocation in the foreseeable future. Accumulate with possible future rebalancing. And we can maybe talk a little bit about what that word rebalancing means. But then 63% are saying, right now we're just going to hold indefinitely and accumulate more over time. And that is the classic dollar cost averaging approach. We don't know where Bitcoin is going, but in our last episode we covered some big predictions for where Bitcoin's going to go, and if those predictions are right, then it does make sense just to hold indefinitely and to accumulate over time. But let's talk a little bit about this. About 25% are accumulating Bitcoin with a possible future rebalancing. David, that's a hot point for you. Thoughts on the whole rebalancing conversation?
Yeah, rebalancing. Rebalancing is it seems to go hand in hand with the older wisdom of have a basket of goods, right? Have a basket of goods so that yeah, if you have a loser, hopefully in your basket you also have a winner. And on the whole, your winner has one more than your loser. So this is the idea. I know like Michael Saylor has challenged the idea of rebalancing. He says when you're going on vacation with your family, you don't hedge your bets and send all, family five doesn't send all five family members on different flights to get to the same place because what if one of us doesn't make it? You pick stuff in life all the time where you're not hedging your bet. If it looks like the best thing, you're all in and you go for it. I don't know that that proves the case or will change people's ideas, but it's a provocative thought to at least get you to ask the question. Okay, rebalancing. Let's and picking a basket. Let's review this again. Let's not just take it as a foregone conclusion or received absolute wisdom. Let's test it. The thing about rebalancing typically goes something like this. And I was thinking of like a sample, and it fits within your 1 to 10%. Imagine if a company said, oh, okay, we're willing to have some exposure to Bitcoin, but we want equal exposure to three other products as well. And in total, we want them to be 8%. of our income we want to be going into that. Those things. The rest is just cash. So 92% is going to remain cash on hand, but 8% of our income we're going to invest in four different buckets, 2% each. And one of those buckets is Bitcoin. Rebalancing says, and you pick a time marker, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years, whatever it is, and you kind of program in how you're going to behave in the future. Hey, in the future, we're going to go back, and if our percentages are off, we're going to rebalance to get back to our original percentages. If one of them is lower than 2% and another's higher than 2%, we're going to stop investing in one, start investing more heavily in the other until we get them all back to it. But imagine what this actually means. Imagine, and I'll pick the plus side here because that's where we're optimists as concerns Bitcoin. Imagine your 2% allocation in Bitcoin became 4%. And the other three buckets of 2% each all went to one, So Bitcoin's up, the other three are down. Together, they're only 7% of your portfolio now. But Bitcoin was your big winner. If you're going to rebalance, you're going to stop investing in Bitcoin for a while, typically, or even sell some of that Bitcoin. That's aggressive rebalancing. And you're going to invest more heavily or at a longer time span and these others until you get everything back at 2%. But imagine what you just did. You have now rewarded your losers and you have said to your winner, you got to be sidelined for a while, right? That's what rebalancing does or has the ability to do. And we sort of just let that happen because rebalancing sounds like, oh yeah, that sounds prudent. Let's go with that. Let's go with that. You've sidelined your winner, you've hamstrung it even, and you've meanwhile rewarded your losers. So that said, they mentioned 25% of their folks here, 24.7, accumulate with the possibility of future rebalancing. I take that to mean that maybe River just simply understands their clients, that people will enter through their front door with the bias that rebalancing is a wise thing to do, right? With some sort of rebalancing, or maybe they say this. Yeah, we know Bitcoin's been a winner, but everybody has to lose from time to time, and so they've won so much that clearly they're going to lose in the future. Maybe it's that sort of bias. I'm not sure,
Well,
but this their language of possibility of future rebalancing. I don't think it's that River is advising that they do that. They're just allowing people to set up their investments and say, oh, of course, we will look at that with you in the future and have that discussion. And if you want to rebalance, we will.
I think the idea of rebalancing comes from the natural volatility of markets, right? So in general, in investing, you want to sell when you're up and you want to buy when you're down. You want to sell a little bit off the top so that you take profits, they say, and that's where this rebalancing comes from. Maybe when Bitcoin was having these enormous price swings, right? Continually having 80 to 85% drawdowns after a huge blow off top. I was never able to time the market to make that happen, but I think that at least in theory, it's a possible good idea. And yet on page 15 of the report, their bottom chart, big headline, Bitcoin is now less volatile than gold. So the volatility of Bitcoin has been going down. It was, admittedly, back in 2020, and this chart would even be more skewed going further back. Bitcoin has been highly volatile, but Bitcoin's volatility is now going down. It's actually under the volatility of gold, and a lot of people hold gold as a steady thing that just keeps chugging along, right? So Bitcoin having less volatility, it actually doesn't make sense to try to rebalance, say, if Bitcoin has gone up a little bit, because the likelihood that you will now sell at the top and be able to buy lower becomes less and less and less as we go through time, and Bitcoin becomes less volatile, because I think the basic understanding would be that it's just maturing as an asset class, and there are a lot more people that are participating in it. The financial market, with all of their very complicated vehicles for investing in Bitcoin and shorting and longing and puts and all this kind of stuff, futures, really has decreased the volatility. And so, yeah, that's another reason that I think it wouldn't make a lot of sense to be rebalancing or fiddling with your portfolio all the time. But even if that was what you wanted to go into Bitcoin allocation and say, we're just going to play it really conservative, 1% possible rebalancing, great. Do it, and then study Bitcoin and find out why this asset continually outperforms every other, right?
So I think this is where maybe I sometimes tried against the Bitcoin common sense thing of never sell, right? And I think we talked about that a couple episodes ago about what good is Bitcoin for, what is Bitcoin good for, and so a lot of people, when they think about rebalancing, also think about, hey, I want to take my profits, put them into something that is different, right? Is not as volatile. So even though we talk about Bitcoin as less volatile, to a lot of people, hey, I want to trim off a little bit of this and put in something like gold or treasuries, because I just can't handle the percentage portfolio. But they talk about, I don't know if this is a proper way to talk about rebalancing or not, but on page 10, they talk about 4 different uses of corporate earnings that Bitcoin is using, which I think is a fun way to think about rebalancing or using some of your Bitcoin. I forget whoever writes the Fire BTC newsletter, his most recent Substack article talked about how money is something, and when we save money, that's actually using money for what it was meant to be used for. So like storing wealth is a tool of money that then when we're done storing it, we exchange it for something in the future. And so I think when we think about Bitcoin and saving Bitcoin, they list out 4 different things. I think 3 of them really applies to nonprofits especially. So first, return earnings to shareholders. That would be somewhat funny if the church gave a dividend to all of its members, or something like a share buyback. But, maybe I've heard of churches that take like the Christmas offering and then buy gift cards and give it to people and say, hey, now go out and bless the community. I think that's a really cool way. So maybe it does do something like that. But the other 3 are reinvest back into the business. So covering capital expenditures or research and development. So, think about, hey, let's put a new roof on the sanctuary, or where I am, we're talking about trying to build buildings. Everyone's always wanted a gym here. We don't have a gym. So what would it look like to use part of that as seed money for a gymnasium someday down the road? That's a great way. They talk about growth and expansion. So marketing and advertising, mergers and acquisitions. I don't really know too many churches that are buying businesses, but I know a lot of churches that don't think it's very important to use or to have marketing. And so maybe this becomes part of your marketing budget, right? That, hey, we're going to allocate a small amount to that. But then the last one they talk about is strengthen the balance sheet. And the 2 things they say there are to do more Bitcoin purchases or debt repayments. And this is one where I think most churches, nonprofits, especially churches, whether you're in debt for millions of dollars or a couple, I've said this to our principal here multiple times, jokingly and 100% serious. We've got like a $1.8 million mortgage right now with LCF for our existing property here. But what would it look like if, we refinance that mortgage out for another 20, 30 years, lower our monthly payment, increase our cash flow, and then with that cash flow, buy 1% of that in Bitcoin? I would be willing to guess that in, 20 years from now, we might be able to pay off that entire mortgage just with the Bitcoin that we've held and still have some left over. And I think that's an incredibly powerful way to in some ways you're manipulating the financial system that exists. You're exploiting the loophole of what is debasement in currency and having debt. But I think too often Christians have this idea that debt is like evil and bad. And, we can thank Dave Ramsey mostly for that. And yes, scripture says the borrower is slave to the lender. That's true. You are slave to them. But just because you're a slave to them doesn't mean that it could actually maybe be beneficial to you in the long term to take out that debt, as the future purchasing power of those dollars that you took debt out on are less into the future. And so rebalancing maybe looks like saving, but then spending on things that are useful for your nonprofit, right? The idea too of I'm going to 10x my lifestyle. So if I can sell some of my Bitcoin and buy a house, or put a down payment on a house, that's going to 10x my lifestyle. That's a exchange I'm willing to make, knowing that I'm going to lose out on the future, but because of what it does give to me. So whether that means I'm not on the same page with both of you or not, I think it's an important sort of side thing to say or to contribute as we think about rebalancing, especially as a business and a nonprofit.
I will say that I am much more allergic to debt than it sounds like you are, Jared, and part of that is because I lived through some just awful things, and maybe it's just personal or whatever.
Sure.
But watched some friends that debt really got away from them, and then was just incredibly destructive. And during the 2008 financial crisis, I just read a ton about debt during the Great Depression.
Oh, sure.
But I do think that there are a lot of ways to think about it, and differing people have differing amounts of tolerance for debt. It's essentially just navigating risk, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's all about reasonable things too, right? So I'm not saying you should go lever up, $1 million and get all the debt you can. It's all about using the things that you have in a way that is still faithful and all those sort of things. So lest you hear me wrong,
there are some case studies of people who did kind of bet their entire lifestyle on Bitcoin and took out a huge debt, like took a second mortgage on their home and bought a whole bunch of Bitcoin. And well, you can go find those stories. It's pretty crazy stuff. I want to point to another chart or a little section of the paper. It's on page 17, and it's called Public Perception of Bitcoin. And I just want to read through these. It really is staggering how really important people in the world have changed their tune on Bitcoin. And people might complain that this is just a bunch of old white guys that are commenting on Bitcoin, but for whatever reason, they have been given an immense amount of power and responsibility, and so their voices matter. So Jerome Powell, Federal Reserve Chair, in 2021 said Bitcoin is highly volatile and therefore not really useful as a store of value and isn't backed by anything. But in 2024, he said, actually, it's like gold, only it's virtual gold. It's really a competitor to gold. Donald Trump, you may have heard of him, in 2019 said, I am not a fan of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies which are not money and whose value is highly volatile and based on thin air. And in 2025, the President of the United States of America said, together we will make America the undisputed Bitcoin superpower. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, the largest investment firm in the world, in 2017 said Bitcoin is an index of money laundering. And then talk about intellectual humility. In 2024, he said, quote, my opinion 5 years ago was wrong. I believe Bitcoin is legitimate. Well, he then went to lead his company to start this ETF, and he is he is all in. He's had lots of public statements about Bitcoin, but to be so humble to say my opinion on Bitcoin was wrong, that's impressive. Jamie Dimon, who has had a lot of negative things to say about Bitcoin, CEO of JP Morgan, said Bitcoin itself is a hyped up fraud. It's a pet rock. That's his favorite phrase. Some people talk about Bitcoin as being like Beanie Babies. Jamie Dimon says it was like a pet rock. But in 2025, he said, all right, fine, we're going to accommodate. It's what the customer wants. And so he's given in. Mark Cuban, the guy on Shark Tank in 2019, says, I'd rather have bananas than Bitcoin. I can eat bananas. And in 2025, Mark Cuban said, well, I think Bitcoin has more value than gold. If it did, if Bitcoin actually had the same USD value to Bitcoin, each Bitcoin would be worth an amazing amount of money compared to where it is now. Michael Saylor, the famous Bitcoin guy for strategy, in 2013, everybody gets the Bitcoin at the price that they deserve, right? In 2013, Saylor said Bitcoin's days are numbered. Seems like just a matter of time before it suffers the same fate as online gambling. And in 2025, repeating a statement that he's made many, many, many times. He said Bitcoin is harder, stronger, faster, and smarter than any money that has preceded it. Period. People have changed their tune on Bitcoin, and listener, viewer, it is okay for you to have had a negative view of Bitcoin at some point, and then after you listen, maybe even to this podcast, you come to a different opinion of Bitcoin. I think that is good. I love that they're normalizing that and that they're saying, look at these powerful people in the world who are changing their tune on how they think about this asset. Guys, any thoughts on that?
I love it. It fits for me two little pieces of this document that have been hanging out earlier on for me. One was at the top of a page Jared referenced, top of page 10. It said they titled a section Bitcoin has emerged as a preferred way to retain earnings. Like we are literally struggling to retain earnings. A friend from the Pacific Northwest recently texted me and another buddy, and he said, I looked at my Robinhood account, looked at the prices of some things, and he says, I realize I owe you an apology, Dave. And this was from conversations going back 3, 4 years ago, and I tried impressing upon him that this was happening. But then he went and he ran the numbers. He said, I'm making more money today and have less purchasing power than I did 5 years ago. And he actually did some hard work, some of those hours of work, and he came to that. And he realized that right now, despite a larger paycheck than yesteryear, he is struggling to retain earnings and their purchasing power. And so he's coming over to Bitcoin. And then they also talked about on page 11, why are businesses choosing Bitcoin over other assets? So why are people's individual corporate business sentiments changing like those gentlemen you just read, Ben? They list a variety of things, but the very top two, I think, really caught me. The first one is inflation resistance, related exactly to what I was just talking to. They said Bitcoin's fixed supply offers businesses a way to preserve value over time and hedge against inflation. And then the next one, businesses are literally recognizing what I'm about ready to say and valuing it. Get this, enhanced liquidity. You can buy things that are of great value, and yet in the moment when you need cash, they can be hard to offload, right? Including gold, by the way, including gold, homes, all kinds of things. Enhanced liquidity. You can transact in Bitcoin, final settlement, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, whereas the banking system is said to be open and operable about 24% of the time, a quarter of the year, our banking hours. So they recognize all of that, Ben and Jared, and it's changing sentiments. I go back to in my mind, to the church I previously served. Our church body, our local church body, which was our district, suggested in some documents that we have 3 to 6 months of reserve cash, emergency cash on hand. Because of the size of the church, we felt that we could get away with 3 months. And we did. It took a while, but we built up that 3 months worth of reserves. Pardon me. We put it aside appropriately. I believe to this day they may still have that. However, for that 3 months of reserves to actually be 3 months of reserves means that through the years from the time we established it till now, that they have likely had to infuse it with more cash because the world has gotten more expensive. The church budget likely has grown and they've had to do it. I'm asking myself, would a church ever consider doing the first 3 months in cash? And by the way, that's emergency funds. To my knowledge, in the 10, 12 plus years that that's been established and funded now, I don't know that they've ever had to use it, right? But would a church consider doing 3 months in that way, and then the second 3 months in something like Bitcoin, and then watch them over the intervening years? I'll tell you this, one will need fed speaking of balancing, one will need fed, and the other will have the potential to feed you, so to speak. And that's not financial advice. Nothing on this program is. And yet, as we think of nonprofits, as we think of ministries, that's the potential power of the distinction of these two asset classes.
So good. Jared, any closing thoughts on this Business River report?
I mean, a similar sort of thing to what I said earlier, that a lot of this is adoption, which seems like the big theme of this past year or so. I mean, we just released the year of doing a podcast, and I think we talked about it there. But again, this is a business adoption focused report from people changing perspectives, from mom and pop businesses beginning to store some of their reserves to more companies that are providing Bitcoin services. The circle and the network effect, if you want to use that word, of Bitcoin is just continuing to grow and to grow and to grow. And in some ways, I truly wonder, when will it just become normal or not even interesting, because it will just be a regular part of it. So a good example of this, like Preston Pish's podcast, right? He just said that he's going to start covering other things now because there's too many technological changes. But I also think it's because we've reached a point at, I don't know, you want to call it peak Bitcoin podcast, or that there's just, in some ways, it's becoming that uninteresting thing that a lot of people know about, not too many people know a whole bunch about. They at least heard the name. But I don't wonder, what does it look like in the world where Bitcoin is just a normal part of your portfolio? It's a normal part of the world, whether it's a store of value or currency itself that people are exchanging on a day-to-day basis. It seems like things are still marching on that way. That, are we still largely in the early innings? Absolutely, but we're still so much further than we were just a year or two ago that it is hard to even remember, or hard to even appreciate just how much things have changed. So another good marker for me as we track and think about adoption in the world.
That's awesome. Great thoughts. I want to conclude with just a little hat tip or shout out to Sam Baker. Sam Baker is listed in the report as the author, basically, of the report. He's a young research analyst at River. He's on X. I just want to say that this report for me was one of the most beautiful, well laid out, just easy to read, easy on the eyes, lots of creative infographics. And when I got done reading it, frankly, I put it into Grok in a couple of pages that I said, how is Sam Baker creating this report? Because I want to learn how to create reports the way he has. So just a huge shout out to somebody like Sam Baker, not a huge name in Bitcoin, 2.7 thousand followers. He's doing an amazing work, though. He's put out several research reports for River, and an under followed account, in my opinion. So, Sam, thanks for this work, and keep it up. And yeah, if you want to ever join us on the podcast, it'd be great. So with that, hey, listeners, great to be with you. Great to read through another report. We are readers of the scriptures, and the church has taught us to be readers of words because they have so shaped our world, our faith, and the church. And it's just a blessing and opportunity to be readers, to love reading through things, to gain more knowledge and wisdom as we serve God, our neighbor, our families, and the churches and ministries that we're affiliated with. So great to be with you today. Keep reading, and we'll see you next time.